Welcome back to Story Hustler, Murder Mayhem PTSD. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Mike.
Like and subscribe. Got that out of the way. We have some breaking news this episode. A man named Charles Rothenberg, who committed one of the most horrendous and notorious crimes in the last half century, was up for parole yesterday. And we have a personal connection to the overall story, but also to this hearing that took place yesterday. You were there and made a statement. And
Yeah,
I want to dive into that.
right. I have sat through a lot of courtroom hearings, trials of every stripe, and this was a first for me, participating in a parole hearing for a guy responsible for one of the most notorious and high profile attacks, attempted murders, really so infamous in American history, and so certainly the crime itself is something that gets your blood boiling. But it just so happens that we have been friends with
The victim of this crime. And to dive into it and give you some background, it happened in 1983. And Charles Rothenberg was married to Marie, who is a dear friend of ours. But when they were married, they had a child named Dave. And Dave was 6 years old, and they were going through a divorce at the time, I think, or
I just want to stop there because I think this is one point that always is sensitive to Marie. She had gone out of her way to make sure that she knew that Charles at this point was a felon and a louse, but she went out of her way to make sure that this man could be part of their child's lives.
yeah.
So I think to characterize it, I think she takes offense when people characterize it as transpiring during a custody dispute.
It was not at all because of that. It's just because Charles is an awful human being.
And
But
he was on the lam from the law,
yes,
grabbed the kid and ran across country. But we're going to
yeah.
fill in the
So
detail.
Charles had just gotten fired from his job because he had been going into other employees' lockers and stealing from the actual business itself. He gets fired. He goes back and he vandalizes the business pretty badly, steals more, and is on the lam because of this crime that he has committed. He kidnaps his 6-year-old son, Dave, from Marie's house, and he takes him across the country to California. They're in Brooklyn, New York at this time. Takes him across the country to California with the hopes to go to Disneyland and have a weekend away with his dad. They get to California, they check into a hotel, and Charles gives Dave a sleeping pill. Dave is peacefully asleep in his bed, and Charles douses Dave and the entire hotel room in kerosene and lights it on fire and escapes, just walks away and watches as his son burns in this hotel room. Luckily, some bystanders around the crime went in and heard this boy screaming, went in and saved him and brought him out of the fire. And Dave lived. Dave miraculously survived. He was burned severely from head to toe, had to have so many surgeries throughout his life, skin grafts, all sorts of operations, but was badly, badly, badly burned and just severely scarred for the rest of his life. And his father gets caught and is only given 6.5 years in prison.
Given 13,
Then 13, but he only served 6.5 years in prison for this heinous act against his son. Dave never let this break his spirit, went on to lead an incredible life, and sadly passed away in 2018 at the age of 42 because of the wounds inflicted by his father when he was 6 years old. But yes, led an incredible life. You met him, what, 25 years? You guys were friends 25 years?
Yeah, about, yeah.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to grow up with him in my life, and he was such a source of happiness and encouragement and just utter delight. And I'm so thoroughly grateful that I got to meet him.
Yeah, that was a very good condensation of this horrible story. The backstory. All that happened in 1983. Charles did get busted. He got given 13 years. He ended up doing 6.5. He gets out. But Charlie's not the kind of guy that's going to keep his nose clean for very long. He subsequently gets in other jams with the law, gets more prison time, I think gets out a second time, and is now back with firearm charges and theft charges, and he's now back in the can because of California's three strikes law. Charlie's 82 years old, and Charlie wants to get out. So he went before a parole board yesterday, and it was interesting because I, of course, know this story through the eyes and the words of my friend Dave, the guy who knows it better than
The
anybody.
victim.
And of course Marie is a dear friend of ours as well, and we, it was lovely. We recently spent some time, and she's a great person. And her statement, I can tell you, I've heard a lot of like moving testimonials or moving personal, victim impact statements in courts of law. I don't think I've ever heard one more powerful and passionate and articulate and raw and real as what Marie delivered in Charles' parole hearing yesterday. Yeah, I was so moved. She's and well, I'm thinking about it, Dylan. Before we get off the subject, anybody who wants to really know this story, Marie put out a book some years ago. Just recently had it republished.
Stamped.
Yeah, revamped, and it shows some of Dave's artwork, of course, one of his most famous self portraits, and Marie Rothenberg's book, David's Story. You want the deep dive, you want the real McCoy story of what happened here, and it's so beautifully written, just as her statement yesterday was so beautifully articulate. Read this. This will give you a background of our dear friend, but
We'll link it below too.
huh?
We'll link it below. So if you want to,
Yeah, yeah, and I was honored. There's a piece. There was a chapter I wrote in my book. You read that, and it centers on a weekend we spent with you and Dave up in Vegas and your mom. But Marie included that as a part of this book. But it's her writing that you get this book,
yeah.
David's story. So, so Charles is now up for parole. 82-year-old, feeble, little, pathetic old man. This is a guy that in my more macho moments, just knowing Dave's stories, he's one of those handful of guys I always thought, give me 5 minutes alone with him in a dark parking lot.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I felt about him, knowing what he had done to my friend. And, so Marie was going to speak at his parole hearing. She approached me some weeks ago and said, "Do you want to say something? Because you're an old friend." And I was honored that she would call on me. And I said, "Marie, I'm happy to do this, but I only want to do so in support of whatever your wishes are in this
Mhm.
matter, because I don't. This is your story, and her story is as remarkable as any individual in this drama. She and Dave and their story together and their bond, that
Mhm.
really together they survived what would have killed
The worst of the worst, the worst thing that could
any
happen.
other. Yeah, yeah, and she's a remarkable human being. But so Marie reached out and said, "You want to say a couple of words?" And boy, I'll tell you, that was. I said, "Sure," but I've been just struggling with this. What I was going to say when I
Yeah.
got face to face with this guy, and it was early. It was interesting early on when Marie asked me to do this. I was saying, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." I'll tell him just throw away the key, which is what my immediate reaction was. But then she
That
said,
wasn't Marie's immediate reaction.
huh? But
That
well,
was
this
hers.
she inspires me by her courage and
Yeah.
compassion. Because she says, yeah, and I said, how are you approaching this whole thing? And she said, I think if I can characterize, she said, I want to go genuinely in to see if at any time Charles has done anything to really improve himself.
Yeah.
I can tell you now, just looking at him, self-pitying, just always pointing the finger of blame. He's the victim in this. And she was saying, I want to hope that he's made some progress. And so I'm thinking, if Marie's going to go in with an open heart and an open mind, I really want to go in as well. But after seeing Charles Rothenberg, who now goes by, he wanted to get rid of his name because it is pretty notorious, just like Dave wanted to get rid of the name. Dave started going by Dave. Dave. Well, his father that lit him on fire now goes by Charlie Charles. So it was
Like,
Charlie.
bastard.
We, yeah, I guess. So it was Charlie sitting, and it was one of those Zoom conferences. There was a commissioner who was sort of running this hearing, and a woman
Yeah.
who was representing the sort of penal community. A district attorney guy was on the screen. A poor defense lawyer who had the very unenviable job of trying to ask a few positive questions and put some positive spin on Charlie. I felt bad for that attorney. And then Marie and then I were, so it was just a hodgepodge of people on the screen. But Charlie was there in the corner. Again, I went in inspired by Marie, thinking I'm going to be open-minded about this. And honestly, in many ways, he lived down to almost every one of my worst expectations. Uh, just denying having anger issues,
He
denying.
blames it on Marie.
Yeah, blame it on everybody, but when asked, did he about to give what did he do to his victim? What does he say to his son? And the judge sort of pushed him on it because Charles wouldn't answer any questions really directly. He immediately said, "Well, I loved my son. They made a movie about him. You probably know that." This was after they were pushing him. What did you do to your son? And then he's off on some tangent. I loved my son. They made a movie about him because of your brutal attack, Charles. And then you probably know that. I mean, there was some. Tried to scribble down some quotes of this, and I'm going to write some more. We'll talk more about this, but it was sort of stunning. I mean, I wanted to go in and think. I wish I knew more about psychology. Honestly, having
Yeah.
said to try to really diagnose because it's clearly not stupid, but just so utterly delusional and fabricating stories about his victimization at his hands of Marie and whoever she was in her life at the time, and saying, they were all ganging up and they were going to take Dave away. All of it's bullshit. He was a felon running away from some bullshit charge in New York. And, his ex-wife had done everything in her power to allow him, even though he was at that point a known career criminal, basically. She was still trying to say, Dave needs to have some link with this guy. And he now fabricates that, it was a horrible custody battle. It's bullshit. His ego was hurt. He was scared, and he's a weak little man who took his kid across country and did this horrible act.
And when we met up with Marie like a month ago, I remember her talking about how, obviously she wanted to see if he had any sort of remorse for what he did. And
Right.
you can get therapy in prison. And I remember her talking about how they asked if he had gone to therapy, and he said that, well, he did, but then when everybody found out what he did to his son and why he was in prison, they were all now mean to him because of the debacle with his child. That's what he called it. He called lighting his own child, his 6-year-old son, on fire, a debacle.
Yeah, and again, sort of, he's the victim. They're mean to me because of what I did. I don't. Charlie's 82 years old. He pointed out several times during that hearing that he'll be 83 next month, I think he said. The bottom line after Marie's powerful statement, and they ask all kinds of questions, whether he's an angry man or getting to make any sort of even modicum of sort of admission and acknowledgement to what he had really done. He never got that. He was asked if he was sorry. He continually said he was sorry to Marie and that she was a good mother, gave her that.
Did he say what he was sorry for to Marie, or just like generic, I'm sorry?
Well, yeah, it's sort of generic. No, it never very heartfelt as far as I read, but never once sort of addressed his son. And never once sort of acknowledged. And I know Marie doesn't need it from him, but it would have been nice to hear to him, really have some impact. And I mean, in my little statement, I sort of just talked about the relationship of fathers and sons, and it's just. Yeah, man, I broke down. Got all teary. Marie marched through hers much. She's a heck of a lot stronger and more courageous than I am, but she, in her statement was very powerful, and I sort of sobbed my way through a couple of lines about Dave's impact on me and our family and our feelings about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think there was any doubt that, the psychological pathology or whatever goes on with this guy, is never going to go away.
Yeah.
And so the parole board said, no, you're not, no, denied the parole. I
Thank
would say
God.
having witnessed, and again, I wanted to see some glimmer of hope, like Marie sort of inspired. Show me something, Charlie, that there is some glimmer of humanity, behind that glib and sort of, occasionally sort of addle-brained facade that you use. Show me that there's a glimmer of humanity now, and maybe show me that you've learned something from your son, who was such a loving and open and great and
Literally
generous.
one of the most kind people that you could ever encounter. Like, I met him in person once, but I remember the numerous phone calls that I had with him and just the kindness that he always showed, no matter what
Yeah,
the subject was. It didn't matter what we were talking about. Just you could tell that this was a gentle human, and they've seen the worst of the worst in humanity. Like, he was lit on fire by his father, someone who's
yeah,
supposed to love and protect you. And he never broke his spirit. It never
yeah.
broke his spirit.
And one of the things I want to point out when we talk, I mean, we're going to do a couple of things on Dave, hopefully, and because we're
Marie.
really interested in talking about his artwork. I got my little piece up there, and Marie's book, and hopefully we'll get Marie to talk to us a little bit about all this. But when people talk about this, you do sort of focus on the horrific event that happened and Dave's bravery and everything. But the part that I can't help but smile every time I start thinking about Dave, because he and I think one of the things that sort of bonded us together, we were both sort of, at heart, goofy, silly kids, that part of me. My recollection is like we were always laughing and trying to make each other crack up with something stupid, or talking about the nature of art or the source of creativity. And we got to know each other when Dave was in his late teens in that current affair LA bureau, which was full of some of the wildest and funniest people you're ever going to meet, Dave being among them. So I remember these late night edit sessions where we're working on some OJ story or Heidi Fly story. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, and we're all sitting around at an edit bay, delirious, laughing our guts out, and that's those are the moments that I cherish, and so glad that I had Dave in part of my life, because, in many ways, more than anything else, he just wanted to be just one of the guys and have just a day of being normal and having a few laughs and hanging out with his pals, and that's the part of Dave that I miss the most, and then when we moved to Arizona, he'd call me late at night, and I'd walk around the pool, and we'd talk for a couple of hours. There's just so many, and they're just fun times. There were just so many good times with Dave, and
I loved when he came to my tournament when we were in Vegas and just seeing you two up in the stands, just watching me and supporting me.
hollering and booing when the refs got it wrong. We had
Meant
to
the
sit
world to me.
we had to sit way up there. They would have thrown us out. But yeah, anyhow, so we've rambled on all over. What did we want to talk about? We just established.
Justice was served, unlike our last episode on the Heber Jeffs trial. Justice was actually served in this instance.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice not to be talking about Heber and Warren in this one. So with that said, no more. Yeah, I mean the headline is that California three striker Charles Rothenberg, aka Charlie Charles, the man who committed a horrible act back in 1983, set his son on fire and very nearly killed him. Charlie has been through the legal system, and he was up for parole yesterday. And I spoke at the hearing. Dave's mother, Marie, spoke at the hearing. A number of official types spoke at the hearing. At the end of the day, Charlie Charles was denied parole. He'll get another crack at it 5 years from now. At that time, Charlie will be 88. And if he's still around and I'm still around, maybe I'll go back to the next one and see if he has shown any sort of growth.
He
But
won't. He's 83 years old. I think at that point you're pretty set in your ways, but
yeah. Anyhow, yeah, our highest wish, best regards always to Marie, and we're thinking about her, and whenever we're talking about Dave, you can't really do it without Marie because they were just such a united front of strength. One of the things Marie talked about that was so impactful yesterday was just in the wake of this, she Dave was aware that how sensitive she was and how hurt she was by all this. And she, of course, was acutely aware of how painful and hurt Dave was. And so between the two of them, the reaction was he didn't want to show any kind of weakness because it made his mom sad. Mom never wanted to show any weakness because it was afraid that make Dave sad. And together, these two people really just clung together against a crazy world that suddenly started including celebrities. And, we got to go more into that story. So, but, the bond between Dave and Marie and how they really, in the wake of what Charles did, and the bond that the mother's love in this, and Dave's love and devotion to his mother was one of the most beautiful parts of this story. And anyhow,
I feel like one thing that Marie said, a story about Dave right after it happened, just kind of like epitomizes how strong and just what a person he was how when he was leaving the hospital, I mean, he's bandaged up, badly burned. Arms are out here because he can't touch anything. Like the bottom of his feet are scarred, and they were brought in a wheelchair, and he didn't want it. He wanted to walk out of that hospital on his own, and he did, on his burned feet, like the worst burn you can imagine. And he's walking, and then he gets home and he wanted to go to the park. And he told his mom he wanted to go to the park because he wanted to see that it was the same as it was before he went to California. And he walked to the park, and people were around there, and they gave him a football, and he walked through the park. And it makes me cry. This whole story just makes me cry. But he was such a strong and inspirational human, and he died way too young. But he's one of those people that just, this earth was so lucky to have him.
Well, and this is, we want to share, we're going to hopefully share some more of his sort of artwork and what's happening, in his memory and legacy. We're going to do that hopefully in coming episodes. But yeah, I have made the point that pound for pound, Dave may have been the toughest guy I've ever encountered.
100%.
Bullshit.
He's inspired me through hard times in my life just because of his strength.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're both.
Also, I just want to say thanks for being a good dad.
Yeah. Thanks.
These kinds of stories, like, you can just really get hit with such shit. And I just want to say thank you for being such a good dad.
That's kind. Thank you, sweetheart. Really.
And we love you, Dave. I hope you're looking down on us. We love you, Marie, and hope to have more coming with Marie and her story.
Yeah.
And anyway, sorry to get emotional.
Yeah, you want the real story. Pick up Marie's book, Dave's story. Marie Rothenberg with Mel White, and there's a little remembrance by Mike Watkins. I'm so honored to be part of that. But
you don't deserve that.
Yeah, probably not. All right, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. I don't know, stateside, European side, somewhere.
Yeah, I'll see you in like a week.
Somewhere
in the European adventures begin.
All right. Well.
All right. Well, signing off for episode 32 or maybe 33, depending on if we get.
Yeah, we got some other things back. Yeah, we got to get some shows out. So we got some
other. Like and subscribe if you've made it to this point in the story. Thanks for watching. I'm Dylan.
I'm Mike. And comments, and we want to give us some guidance. Really.
What you like, what you don't like.
Yeah,
do's and don'ts,
you're telling me that you love Dylan, you hate me. But I
or vice
understand.
versa.
That's fine. But anyhow, I love hearing from anybody. But let's sign off because we're
Yeah.
driving. Okay.
All right. Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.